Hello folks, welcome to Pro Trader Strategies Market Commentary for Monday, April the 12th. I'm Eric Wilkinson, and some of you very well may recognize me as the Wolfman from mainstream media, where I talk about the economic data, the geopolitical environment, how that comes in to impact the markets with some of my market analysis. I'm going to do the same thing in these daily market commentaries, but I'm going to go a little bit further for you folks and talk about option strategies I'm implementing into my portfolio based on those assumptions I come up with in my market analysis. And we do webinars where I have courses built out specifically for you folks to streamline your process in order to find the optimal option strategy for any given assumption. We don't just look at a bullish assumption and say that's a long call. No, what we do is we look at that underlying and then find the strategy that best suited for the environment around that underlying. So please check those out at protraderstrategies.com and sign up for those. All right, so without further ado, let's get on with the economic data. It's a Monday. We don't really have a whole lot. Across the pond, we got some money supply numbers in line with expectations. Retail sales better than expected out of Europe, coming in at 3%, expected to be 1.3%. Now, if you remember last week, we were seeing some pretty dismal numbers coming out of Europe, especially for these retail sales, inventory numbers, things of that nature. Good to see that we're seeing some retail sales numbers coming in a little bit better than expected there, at least across the pond. Here in the United States, we don't really have a whole lot going on here other than everybody is going to be keeping an eye on the White House as the tech sector is converging on the White House to talk about the chip shortage and what we're going to do about that going forward. All right, so for the most part, there's going to be a lot of things to talk about. Let's go over to the equities and the rest of the markets and see what's going on there. We've got crude oil moving higher here today, only 11 cents shy of that 60 handle that we've been trying to avoid here, but trading right around 59.90. That's just shy of that, but right at that value area high we've been talking about, where we've lost a little momentum to the upside. Something to note here, we are starting to see some volume pick up around this 60 handle, so price is being accepted there. Now we have a long way to go before we see that whole paradigm shift from 40 to 60. There's going to have to be a massive amount of acceptance here going forward. That's probably a couple of months of trading at this level to get that paradigm to shift, but we are starting to see a volume node build out there at those levels. Now, Bitcoin making a new all-time high overnight today, almost trading at 62,000, just coming up shy of that. We're well off of that high as of right now. And something to note, it's starting to look like we are creating a topping pattern here in Bitcoin. It seems like all I heard this weekend were people talking about Bitcoin digital wallets. Where we're going to set up my digital wallet, how can I get these different coins that people were talking about. A lot of conversation centered around that. I think it has to do with, a lot of companies are accepting Bitcoin and are investing in Bitcoin, and that's really making this mainstream and driving the market to the upside. Having said that, we always talk about this. The markets want to cause as much pain as it can to the most amount of people. Well, this could be setting us up for a situation where people are looking at this 60,000, seeing this go from basically 6,000 at the beginning of the year to now we're trading 60,000. Are they getting on board a little bit late and maybe buying at the top? We're going to keep an eye on that. It looks a little bit toppy, at least as of right now. And then we look over here at gold. It's continuing to struggle. On Friday, we did see it go up there, test that 200-day simple moving average, lining up quite nicely with my trend line here. And that is making this market lose a little bit of momentum, and we are right there at the point of control where time and volume has been spent. That's going to act as a magnet for this market and probably struggle to get out of this range between really 1,800 and 1,700. So we've got about a $100 range there that the market is going to start settling down in and around this area, unless we start seeing some really hotter than expected inflation that could drive gold futures higher. But at this point, it seems like the dollar being gaining strength to other countries' currencies is really causing gold and some of these other assets that are dollar denominated a little bit of weakness here. And then we can see that the bonds are unchanged for the most part, just slightly in negative territory. VIX is starting to move higher. Maybe we're going to lose those teens and get back into the 20s. Well, we talked about this on Friday, setting up on these tops here yesterday, or Friday, I should say, last trading day, we did create a topping pattern there in the NASDAQ. Today, as of right now, starting to look like we're trying to confirm that topping pattern there. So could be a time to start adding some negative deltas to the portfolio and add a little bit more protection in case there is at least a slight correction. I'm not talking a 10 or 20% correction here, folks. I'm talking about just a slight correction. We've been talking about this. I think we're going to stay in a relatively tight range, sideways market for the remainder of 2021, and those would be times to take advantage of the extremes on the upside and the downside. We're going to be playing this as a swing trade, just like we are going over in our course right now. We're starting a new course here with the trading in and around these swing type trades. All right, so Dow Jones not looking as toppy as the NASDAQ, but we can see that the E-mini S&Ps looks very much like the NASDAQ. We did get an all-time high here at 41.21. That was printed, actually, I thought that was printed overnight. It looks like it was printed on Friday there. So pretty tight range here, and the market's just kind of trying to figure out what's the next step here. And to me, risk is to the downside right now. We got IBM making a bit of a correction. Now remember, I have some covered calls on here, and they are very close to being called away from me. I'm long IBM, remember, but I have covered calls on at the 136 handle, and that is where they would be getting called away. You can see today's move to the downside is gotten away from that 136 handle, but you can tell just $1.50 down on the day. I was very close on those short calls. There's only 4 days left on these, so that theta decay, gamma will really start working in my favor, especially if we get a little bit of a pullback here in IBM. I'll be able to get out of those covered calls before the earnings. I mean, these covered calls are actually going to expire before the earnings, but I do want to get out of all of this stuff before that earning. I might go into it long, but well, that's going to be more of a game time decision. As of right now, looking to get out of my covered calls at the 136 handle for IBM. Got a working order in there. And it's not to get out of 50% of max profit at this point. It is just basically, it is to get out at 50% of max profit. I'm not trying to squeeze this out for the nickel or the dime that I normally do on the covered calls here, folks. So I want to get out of this if I have the opportunity. All right, so that's all I got for you folks. We're going to be doing a webinar this week on the synthetic longs, poor man's covered calls. All of those are going to be the next webinars we're going to be covering here on setting up trades around a swing setup. So we'll talk about how we find those swing setups, and then we'll talk about how we determine what strategy we need for that setup. All right, so check that out at protraderstrategies.com. That's all I got for you folks. Other than if you can't take that, take it easy.